What if I told you there was a technique, a hidden method, whispered only among temple initiates in the shadowed halls of ancient Egypt, that promised not only the prolonging of life, but a path to true immortality? Not the immortality of fairy tales or sci-fi fantasies, but a deeper kind, an immortality of consciousness, a technique so sacred, so powerful, that it was deliberately concealed from the public, passed only through sacred lineage and hidden writings etched in stone and silence. The ancient Egyptians didn't see death the way we do. To them, death was not an end, it was a transition, and those who were prepared could move through that gateway consciously, retaining memory, awareness, and power beyond the veil. But for this, they needed preparation, a system, a method, and they had one. Buried beneath the sands of time, beneath the cryptic hieroglyphs and monuments we still struggle to decode today, lies a spiritual science, a forgotten technique rooted in vibration, light, and the geometry of the soul. This wasn't mythology, it was metaphysics, and only the initiated understood its full power. In this video, we're going to pull back the veil on that sacred technique. We'll explore why immortality meant something very different to the ancients, how the Egyptian priesthood preserved their consciousness across lifetimes, and the role of the Ka, Ba, and Ak, three mysterious aspects of the soul you've likely never heard explained this way. We'll trace this path through the chambers of the Great Pyramid, uncovering symbols that act as keys to higher dimensions. And finally, I'll show you how fragments of this ancient practice survive today, and how you can begin to apply its principles. But be warned, once you see the truth behind this ancient technique, the way you understand death and life will never be the same again. To understand the Egyptian approach to immortality, we must step out of modern assumptions and into the mystical worldview of the ancients, where life and death were not opposites, but parts of a continuum. To the Egyptian initiate, the material world was but a shadow, a testing ground for something far more permanent. They believed in the great cycle, birth, death, rebirth, not just as reincarnation, but as a deeper alchemical process of spiritual refinement. And central to this understanding were three aspects of the human soul: the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak. These were not just poetic concepts. They were energetic components of consciousness, each with its own role in the soul's journey beyond the body. The Ka was your vital essence, your life force, the divine spark that animated your flesh. It was given to you at birth, and it lingered near your body after death, needing sustenance in the form of energy, offerings, or prayers. The Ba was your personality, your unique flavor of consciousness. Unlike the Ka, the Ba was more mobile. It could travel between realms, even after death. It was often depicted as a human-headed bird, able to leave the tomb and revisit the world of the living. And the Ak. The Ak was the goal, the immortal self, a perfected being of light, formed when the Ka and Ba were united after death through sacred rituals and spiritual readiness. The Ak was not bound to the physical or even astral planes. It transcended them. This process of transformation, becoming the Ak, was not automatic. It was something that had to be earned, cultivated through a lifetime of purification, self-mastery, and specific techniques taught in the mystery schools of Egypt. These teachings were not shared with the masses. They were reserved for the initiates, those who had proven their discipline and purity of heart. The ancient priesthood, particularly the followers of Thoth and Osiris, guarded these secrets fiercely. Because immortality was not about cheating death, it was about transcending limitation. Interestingly, many of the rites we associate with Egyptian burial, mummification, the weighing of the heart, the recitation of spells from the Book of the Dead, were not superstitions. They were part of a systematic spiritual technology aimed at preserving the soul's integrity and guiding it safely through the afterlife. The pyramid texts, some of the oldest known religious writings on Earth, speak openly of the soul's journey to the stars and of rituals to open the mouth, not just of the dead body, but of the spirit, allowing it to speak the names of power that unlock the gates of eternity. Even the design of the pyramids themselves, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza, was not random. Scholars and mystics alike have long believed these structures were initiatory chambers, resonant spaces designed to trigger altered states of consciousness and simulate the journey through death while still alive. In essence, they were tools for practicing the art of dying before you die, a phrase echoed centuries later in the mystery schools of Greece and Tibet. In this context, the Egyptian technique for immortality begins to come into focus. It wasn't a single ritual or incantation. It was a path, a sacred science that involved the alignment of body, mind, and spirit with divine order, what the Egyptians called Ma'at. This path was walked by the pharaohs, the high priests, and those rare individuals who dared to look beyond the illusion of mortality. And now, in the next section, we will begin to uncover the actual components of this path, the symbolic keys, the rituals of resonance, and the inner transformations required to awaken the Akh within. To begin understanding the actual mechanism of the Egyptian technique for immortality, we must think less like modern individuals and more like initiates of an ancient temple. The Egyptians did not separate spirituality from science. They viewed the universe as a living intelligence, governed by laws both visible and hidden. The first core concept we must grasp is resonance. To the ancients, everything vibrated with energy, what we today might call frequency. And the body, being a vessel for the soul, could be tuned like an instrument. If it was aligned with higher vibrations, those of truth, love, wisdom, and cosmic order, it became a temple capable of housing divine consciousness. If misaligned, it became a prison, and the soul would wander disoriented after death, unable to unite its parts. This is why the Egyptian initiates underwent rigorous purification, fasting, silence, chanting, and stillness. These weren't just religious practices. They were methods of tuning the self to resonate with the higher planes. But resonance alone was not enough. One had to undergo a symbolic death while still alive. This is where the mysteries deepened. In the inner chambers of temples, initiates would lie in stone sarcophagi, perfectly carved and often placed within resonant spaces like the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. They would remain there in total darkness, sometimes for days, guided by priests or left in silence. Their breath would slow, their heartbeat would soften. In some cases, their consciousness would separate from the body altogether. This was called the rite of the second birth. Modern terms might call it an out-of-body experience, or even a near-death experience. But to the Egyptians, it was a rehearsal for death, a practice run. And if done correctly, it allowed the initiate to consciously navigate the astral realms and learn to retain memory and identity beyond physical form. But here's the key. They weren't escaping the body. They were learning to reintegrate the soul, to reunite the Ka and Ba in full awareness, creating the immortal Akh. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, which we often mistranslate as the Book of the Dead, was a manual for this. It included mantras, vibrational formulas, and symbolic codes that helped guide the soul through metaphysical checkpoints in the afterlife. But to the initiate, these checkpoints were not just future events. They were internal gates that could be passed through while still alive. They believed he who dies before he dies does not die when he dies. But the transformation was not just metaphysical. It was encoded into geometry, light, and sound. The temples were constructed with divine proportions, golden ratios, harmonic angles, and sacred numerology. These weren't decorations. They were resonant blueprints, designed to alter consciousness through spatial and vibrational alignment. In this sense, walking through the temple was not just a journey through space, but through states of being. This is why the initiate's journey always began in darkness, moved through tests of balance and courage, and culminated in a chamber of light, symbolic of the soul's ascension through the dimensions. And central to this whole process was the name. To the Egyptians, your name wasn't just your identity, it was your vibrational signature. It was the sound that tied your soul to eternity. This is why the names of the pharaohs were engraved into stone. To erase a name was considered a form of spiritual murder. It severed the thread of the Akh. So when the initiate entered the rite of second birth, they had to speak their true name, in alignment with Ma'at. Only then could they pass through the gates unscathed. In essence, the forgotten Egyptian technique for immortality was a multidimensional science, combining breath, silence, name, geometry, and vibration, designed to awaken the eternal self before physical death occurred. But this is only half the picture. In the next section, we'll go deeper into the more hidden layers of this practice, the use of sacred light, the serpent fire, and how Egyptian teachings about the spine and brain mirror those of later mystical traditions like Kundalini Yoga and the Kabbalah. Now we enter the deeper chambers of the Egyptian mysteries, where the technique for immortality becomes less symbolic and more alchemical. In many temple carvings, we find images of serpents winding upward, sometimes through a human figure, sometimes along a staff. These are not just decorative. They are visual metaphors for the serpent fire, a concept mirrored in nearly every ancient esoteric system, from Kundalini in India to the caduceus of Hermes. To the Egyptians, this force was real. It was the Sekhem, the sacred life energy that, when awakened, could rise up the spine like a serpent and activate the divine centers of the brain. The spine itself was seen as a ladder, called the Jed pillar, a symbol of stability and resurrection. When properly aligned and awakened, the Jed served as the central channel through which divine energy flowed. You might recognize this image in later mystic traditions as the concept of the tree of life, or the Sushumna Nadi in yogic anatomy. This rising energy was often depicted as being overseen by Osiris, the god of resurrection. Osiris was not just a mythological figure. He was a representation of the perfected soul, the one who had passed through death, overcome dismemberment, symbolizing the fragmentation of the soul, and been made whole again. His counterpart, Isis, represented the intuitive wisdom that gathers these pieces. And Thoth, the scribe of the gods, symbolized the voice of truth that records and guides the soul's journey. But what does this mean practically? It means the Egyptians viewed immortality not as an external reward, but as the internal activation of divine circuitry, a resurrection of energy within the living body. The body was the temple, the spine was the pillar, the brain, the throne. More specifically, they saw two glands in the brain as holding the keys, the pineal and the pituitary. They believed that when the serpent energy rose and stimulated these centers, the initiate would experience a form of inner light, sometimes called the white brilliance or the eye of Ra. This was not imagination. This was direct spiritual illumination, an encounter with pure consciousness that burned away illusion and merged the individual with the eternal. This process was not passive. It required discipline, ritual, and deep introspection. The initiate had to master their emotional body, silence the mind, and align their thoughts with Ma'at, the divine order of the universe. Every action, every word, every breath had to reflect cosmic balance. Even the ancient word for magic, Heka, was not about casting spells. It was about spoken vibration, using sound to reshape reality. The technique for immortality thus involved chanting sacred words, intoning tones that resonated with higher planes. These sounds, often lost in modern translations, were considered keys that unlocked gates within the self, and time itself was viewed differently. The Egyptians measured time not just in hours, but in eternal cycles, the journey of the soul through the zodiac, through incarnations, through dimensions. The initiate, once awakened, could step outside linear time and exist simultaneously in the past, present, and future. This was the true gift of the Akh, omnidimensional consciousness. But perhaps the most striking detail is this. The Egyptian initiate chose their death. Not in the literal sense, but spiritually. They didn't wait for physical death to teach them its secrets. They confronted it head-on, every day, through meditative rituals, dream work, and inner journeying. This is echoed in their mantra: to die each day, to be reborn each morning. They believed that only by dying before death could one transcend the fear of non-being and step into true eternity. And once the fear of death was dissolved, what remained was the luminous self, indestructible, sovereign, free. This wasn't mythology. This was initiation. And though the temples now lie in ruins, the technique remains, in fragments, in symbols, in the subtle memory of your own soul. In the next section, we will explore how these ancient practices can be revived, how you can begin walking the same path today, using modern tools rooted in timeless wisdom. You have now walked with me through the forgotten corridors of an ancient truth, a truth whispered in hieroglyphs, encoded in stone, and guarded by those who remembered what most had forgotten. The Egyptians did not merely build monuments. They built maps for the soul, instructions written in architecture, in sound, in sacred story, pointing to a single, timeless revelation. Immortality is not a gift to be granted, but a state to be awakened. They believed the real death was not of the body, but of memory, of meaning, of soul unawakened. And so they trained to remember, through ritual, through alignment, through deliberate inner work. And now, so can you. You do not need to be a priest in Luxor or a scribe in Karnak. You need only to begin, to sit in silence, to breathe with intention, to speak your name with reverence, and to walk each day as a bearer of mayat, balance, truth, harmony. The path is not glamorous. It will not always be easy, but it is real. And as you continue to walk it, the ancient technique for immortality ceases to be ancient at all. It becomes something immediate, a quiet flame inside you, growing stronger, clearer, more luminous with every breath you take in awareness. So ask yourself, am I living as if I am eternal, or merely passing through? Because the doorway is here, and the key, as it always has been, is within. If this awakened something within you, if you felt even a flicker of remembrance, honor it, keep going. And don't forget to like this video so others can find it. Subscribe for more ancient teachings brought back to light. And together, let us remember what was once forgotten.